Delighted to be joined still by Claire Pearsall, former Conservative government advisor. We're both far right, apparently, according to our former Labour guest. I mean, mind you, he's so far left. With due respect to you, James Matthews, he thinks the Labour Party is probably far right now. What can you do? But there we are. Whether you are listening on DP Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, he thinks you're heinous. I mean,
I love it.
My heinous audience. But there we are. Hiya. I love you though. Do you know what's so weird, Claire?
Go on.
Is a few years ago, if you called somebody far right or racist or all of these sort of words, that would really hurt. I mean, that would. These words are now thrown around so happily and easily about anyone who expresses most reasonable concern about the most reasonable things in the most reasonable terms. It doesn't have any power anymore, and I think that's really terrifying. It's like calling, saying like, oh, fascist, or the word genocide being used, about, certain wars and things. These words cease to lose their meaning.
They do, and it becomes a sort of badge of honour if I get called far right or extreme by certain people. I just sort of think, OK, that means I'm on the right track and I'm right and you're not. I just don't...
It's just pathetic.
I don't get offended by it, and I think they want me to be offended.
But these are the same people who, when I used the term Ramona, so we talked a lot about Brexit last days, that's an outrageous term. No, it's not. It's different from a Remainer. Remainer is somebody who voted Remain. Ramona is someone who's moaning still all these years on since 2016 and tried to stop the vote for Brexit and trying to undermine it since. Basically, I could just call you a non-democrat, an anti-democrat. But it is bizarre the words they do get upset about while throwing out the most outrageous slurs on people.
Because they're allowed to do it to the people like us, but we're not allowed to give it back.
But that's because they're the good people.
Clearly.
Did you not get that memo?
I must
They're
have
the
forgotten
kind
it.
people. We're not. We're heinous. Hello, my heinous fellow souls.
My new T-shirt.
The weird thing is, though, we all seem to be happier than them. Have you noticed that?
Yes, funnily enough, when you sort of hang around with some other heinously right-wing people, you have such a good laugh.
You have such a good... They
really
throw
do.
Great parties. They throw great parties. Anyway,
Superb.
including myself, but there we are. Anyway, should we get to some news? Let's talk about what we're talking about today. Inflation has risen to 3.5%. That's in April, up from 2.6% in March. About what was expected. Oh, so that makes it OK then. But it's all thanks to basically rising energy bills, rising water bills, rising council tax bills. I wonder who that could be down to, an awful lot of it. Oh, Labour Party government and their policies? I wonder. Sorry for being far right. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has said that Britain is becoming a police state under Labour. This after Lucy Connolly lost her appeal yesterday against her 31-month prison sentence for an online rant about migrants on the day of the Southport attacks. Plus, Britain is prepared to impose sanctions on senior members of the Israeli government after suspending trade talks with the country. This is over what Foreign Secretary David Lammy calls his monstrous and intolerable military expansion in Gaza. David Lammy, wait until you hear about the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, every other attempt we've attempted to take on Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And oh my God, what we did in the Second World War too. You're going to be absolutely shocked and horrified. Also, an Iraqi Kurd who smuggled himself into Britain on the back of a lorry. They don't all come on boats, folks. He's won his fight to stay here, despite telling officials he was going to make up a reason for seeking asylum. The 30-year-old man claimed to have lost his Iraqi ID card and argued that sending him back would breach his human rights. No doubt he could also claim, if he had brought his dog, as one other asylum seeker coming on a Channel boat did a few months ago, that having his dog here gave him a right. The dog, by the way, as the front page of The Sun is telling us, we've been paying for the last 4 months in quarantine. He's a German Shepherd, so I assume we can send him back to Germany. That's where his heritage is, after all. Anyway, all of those stories coming up, plenty more besides. Claire Pearsall, as I say, is here. Let's start with inflation. Look, you know as well as I do, you knock on doors, on doorsteps during elections. Things are not going well for your party. We'll come to that in a moment. But inflation going back up to 3.5%. Is a big worry for people. We've actually seen, on average, above inflation wage rises for people, but a lot of that is simply making up for people who did not get 11% pay rises when we had 11% inflation. So Government Minister Steve Reid, the minister I've always gotten very well with. I like this guy. He's a good talker, but he was on air saying about how, look, it was chaos before, we've been bringing inflation down. Inflation was, I think, 2.1% when Labour got in, and now it's 3.5%.
And it's only going to keep going up. If you look at the decisions that are being taken by the Chancellor and a Labour Party who hates private enterprise. And I think that's what I take from this, is they want to squash any aspiration, they want to squash any entrepreneurism, and they want to tax the rich by whatever percentage. And I think it was really interesting with James Matthewson when he pushed him and said, how much is enough? He wasn't going to tell you.
There's this idea that the rich people in this country don't pay enough. Look, there's absolutely the case when we talk about inheritance tax, for instance. The very rich, they have trusts. They don't pay inheritance tax. Most people don't pay inheritance tax. They don't have enough assets. But there is a group of people, I mean, a large number of people every year, who do pay inheritance tax on their family estates because they've worked hard. They go, oh, well, you just had a house that increased in value. No, but someone still had to struggle and strive to pay the mortgage on that, save up for the deposit for that home, and they did well and worked hard. So what? Well, we're going to, how dare you have a house that increases in value? How very dare you? I mean, it's that sort of thing. But the very, very rich don't pay those sort of taxes, but the very rich do pay 30% of taxes in this country. They are funding the most of us. If you're earning under 45 grand in this country, you're being subsidised by those very rich people who are paying tax. The question is, at what point do they're being helped by the fact that you empty their bins, or you're pushing the trolley in the as a porter in the NHS. I mean, it's not. I'm not being in any way at all. I've done enough low-paid jobs in my time, or average-paid jobs. It's not being disrespectful at all. But the reality is, those very rich people over there, they're paying for a lot of the country. There's people in the city we mock and laugh at. They're paying for a hell of a lot of stuff. When they get those bonuses, when they get a £500,000 bonus, best part of 250 grand of that goes in the Treasury coffers. We benefit from that. Now, at the end of the day, do you think that Angela Rayner has the right idea? Because there's clearly this battle between sort of left and right in the party. There's a memo that's been she wrote in March to the Treasury from her as a Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary to the Chancellor, basically calling on for her to raise about 8 different taxes, basically on the rich, so on banks, but on people higher rate taxpayers, on savers with an awful lot of savings, basically cutting their tax benefits, the amount of tax rebate you can get for savings and things like that. Basically, it's all basically tax the rich, raise maybe 3-4 billion quid a year. If you did that, you wouldn't have to do spending cuts. Now, the reality is, it won't touch the sides of the costs of what needs to be cut from government coffers spending. But does this tell you there is a battle going on between the left and the right in the Labour Party behind the scenes already, just 10 months into government? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think this is her laying out her pitch for a leadership challenge in the not too distant future, because you look at the popularity of Keir Starmer and the Labour Party as a whole, the net approval rating is appalling and it keeps going down, and we're only, as you say, 10 months in. So I think that she's positioning herself as the union's girl to take over as Prime Minister, and that's why she's doing it. It's a real Corbynista style arrangement that she wants the government to accept.
I mean, I have to say, with all due respect to Angela Rayner, and I know a lot of people criticise her and everything, and she does a lot of things I don't agree with, but the woman has an incredible, awful phrase, backstory in terms of what she's achieved.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the end of the day, I don't think she's a woman who perhaps understands private business or how markets work, or basically really believes in capitalism. You mentioned polls. I want to mention those because Reform have basically told Keir Starmer with their EU deal, which we talked a lot about this week, that's going to cost the election. They're trying to move on to sort of, I think there's a lot of criticism from the left of the Labour Party that Keir Starmer's moving into, Nigel Farage territory, Reform territory, talking about an island of strangers and tackling mass uncontrolled immigration, and at the same time, he's angering the left there, but no one on the right believes him at all because they know he's not going to do anything about it. We've got this EU youth mobility scheme, they're going to call it youth experience scheme, that's something they're looking at and trying to negotiate. They said it'd be capped, we understand, at 100,000 people, but the EU want people to be able to bring their family members in. Well, if you're a 25-year-old coming over to the UK to work or study, why the hell are you bringing your family? Unless we're talking about their kids, in which case, I don't know, we're talking about people setting up home here. We're never going to be able to send these people back. Of course they want to come here. We've got countries with youth unemployment of 50%, large parts of Southern Europe. So Reform's saying your EU deal is going to cost you the next election. It's interesting. The party that's most being hurt at the moment in the polls is actually the Tory party. Latest YouGov poll, Reform are on 29%. They are hovering around this number. When they had the odd moment where they reached above 25%, people go, oh, it's an outlier. Routinely now, of course, we've seen actually in the local elections, Runcorn by-election, they are delivering on the day. They're not just polls, not what you think online, what people actually do when they get to the ballot box. But Reform on 29%, Labour down at 22%. They lost more than 10 points in 10 months after the election. Liberal Democrats in third place. What the actual at 17%. The Tories down to 16%. What do you make of that?
It's appalling. And
when you say it's appalling, what do you mean?
The leadership of the Conservative Party at the moment has no plan for what the Conservative Party is going to be. We're in opposition. We've taken an absolute beating in a set of local elections. We took an absolute beating at the general election of last year. And you need to be able to come out fighting, and that's the one thing the Conservative Party hasn't done. What are your core values? What are your policies going to be? You can talk about renewal all you like. Basically, you've now got to resuscitate the Conservative Party. I think, renewal is a nice idea, but you're going to have to come up with something pretty quickly.
And this idea of having 2 years of looking at policy, many people have predicted Kemi Badenoch won't survive the 2 years. I've always said, I like Kemi Badenoch. I think she's been staunch on some of the issues I care about. Yeah. At the end, didn't hear her on things like lockdown, and you can't be a freedom fighter if she's late to some parties. She's ahead of the game. She's questioning net zero earlier on because she was in cabinet again. Collective responsibility at the end of the day. I want to know what you're doing to fight it behind the scenes. Yeah. That's the thing. Keir Starmer, he was claimed, remember, during the Labour leadership battle, and it was Lisa Nandy who actually pointed out. He was saying that he did question, anti-Semitism and stuff from Jeremy Corbyn in cabinet, in shadow cabinet, and Lisa Nandy said, "No, you didn't. I was there. You didn't do it." I mean, it just called him out on it. It's important to know what happens there. But a lot of people say that at this point that Kemi Badenoch on these poll ratings, she is not going to survive until after the next local election. She'll be forced out.
And I think that's probably right.
And who should be leader then?
Oh, I mean, I'm not going to pick a leader. Anybody that I suggest...
everyone's saying Robert Jenrick is the obvious person.
If I suggest a name for a leader, it's guaranteed that they'll never get in. So I'm always the kiss of death when it comes to things like that. So I don't know. I think we need to actually just be looking to get behind a leader. That leader needs to be strong. So Kemi needs to actually come out fighting, and she's just not doing it. More
than she's doing right now. Very interesting. Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. What about a former Tory leader? Still thinks he's got the chance of coming back. Boris Johnson. He has said that Britain is turning into a police state under Labour. This after Lucy Connolly lost her appeal yesterday. Talked about this on the show. Happened around this time yesterday. She lost her appeal against her 31-month prison sentence for I say tweet. We all still use that word. A post on social media, post on X on the day of the Southport attack. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. I was saying earlier, and got a call, I think it was Stephen, who said, come on, move on, it's 5 years ago. But Boris Johnson saying that we've got 2-tier police, I think is a bit rich. He said that it was the judgment yesterday by the courts was crazy and inhuman. He said Starmer's Britain is losing its reputation for free speech and turning into a police state where we must all learn to fear the knock on the door simply for something we say. The UK police, he said, are now making over 10,000 arrests every year for online comment, more than the police in Russia itself. And this judgment is yet another propaganda gift for Vladimir Putin. And I was pointing out, I think quite rightly, that he was the head of a government that locked us in our homes 23 hours a day, told us to spy on neighbours. He authorised the spying, the monitoring by people trained in the military in the British government, the British officials, to monitor the online messages and the interviews and things that I was doing, other journalists, that scientists, Oxford University scientists and others, and even his own MPs. And my information, I've had a formal apology from a senior, from a lawyer representing the government. I've got it in writing, formal apology after they sent my information to a counter-terrorism unit in America because I was such a threat asking questions about lockdown policy. The idea that the police state and that the attack on freedom of speech in this country started under Starmer. It's got worse under two-tier Starmer, but it did not start under Starmer. Bearing in mind we had non-crime hate incidents, people getting a record for something that's quite literally, clue in the name, not a crime. That was going crazy from 2014, exploded under Boris Johnson, did nothing about it. He could have stopped it. He did nothing about it. I think he talks a good game. I really think he talks a good game. Writes a great column for the Daily Mail, but at the end of the day, he doesn't walk the walk when it comes to actually being in power and what he actually does.
No, he doesn't. He's a great campaigner, and that's the one thing that I've always said. He was a great asset to the Conservative Party because he brought everybody together. He reached out to those that we would never normally appeal to.
And he did get Brexit done. It wasn't perfect, but he was the only person who could do it at the time.
Absolutely.
And I thank him for that.
But I also do feel that he jumps on a bandwagon of something that is looking like it's popular.
Yes. Oh, this looks like my people feel strongly about Lucy Connolly.
Exactly.
I think I'll get on this bandwagon.
But he just, he flows with the wind and he'll go in a different direction. And then he looked at net zero and thought that was a really good idea. Thanks for that.
I think his wife thought that.
Indeed, but that's what I mean about moving with the wind. So
do you agree with everything? I mean, you're married to a lefty. You don't agree with half the things your husband says.
No, and he isn't going to persuade me otherwise. But I think Boris Johnson needs to go and have a little bit of peace and quiet somewhere else. I don't need to hear that he is
he the
the
great
answer.
white? We're told in the polls that the Tories would do better if Boris Johnson was the leader.
No, people have very, very short memories when it comes down to it, because all of the pandemic stuff, which was under his watch,
which is one of the reasons
great.
why we're in the economic doldrums we're in.
Absolutely is. And all of his handling of Pacific scandals as well in the House of Commons, where he thought that things were fine and he covered it up, and it's always the cover-up that gets them, he was responsible for.
Yeah. I mean, I know people say get over it. It's like, I feel so betrayed.
Yeah.
I feel so betrayed by that.
Absolutely.
I really, really do. On Lucy Connolly, though, what was the decision to send her to prison in the first place, and for so long, for 31 months? Was that the right decision back last August? Was it the right decision to not release her early? She's going to be out in August, so she served a year behind bars. She was sentenced to basically two and a half years. This was the full tweet. Even yesterday, again, everyone sort of narrows it down, and I shouldn't have done that. I should have read the full tweet. I'll read the full tweet to you. This is what she wrote on the day of and then deleted 3.5 hours later, on the day of the Southport attack, where we saw 3 little girls stabbed to death, and 8 other girls are also stabbed, living with those injuries, and adults too. A mass deportation now. Set fire to all the effing hotels full of the bees for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them. I feel physically sick knowing what these families will have to endure. That she means obviously the families of those who've lost their lives. If that makes me racist, so be it. Should she have ever gone to prison at all? Should she have been prosecuted in the first place?
I don't think so. Now, I had a different opinion at the beginning when there was a lot of information that wasn't given to us, and when you
false information that she'd written other racist tweets.
Absolutely, and that's what I find very, very difficult, because I had a clear view at the beginning. Yeah, she needs
Thank
to go.
rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly
she
what
deserves
I said,
what's coming to her. However, no, I don't think so. I don't think you need to be locked up. She shouldn't have written it. She shouldn't have put it out there. But is it an actual crime to go to prison for 2.5 years? No, it absolutely isn't. There are worse things going on out there that need dealing with. There were other people who wrote much worse and were inciting people to go burn down hotels, for example. I don't see them being locked up for 2.5 years.
People who actually literally went on riots. And also, as pointed out earlier, those men carrying their Palestinian flag, waving it in their soft-top car, drove down basically the end of my road in North London a few years ago, waving a flag with a loud hailer. A loud hailer, caught on video, shouting, "We're going to rape your wives and daughters,"
exactly.
and talking about the Jews.
They're still out there on the streets.
If Lucy Connolly had written a tweet about the Jews, she probably wouldn't have gone behind bars, because those guys, although nothing happened for ages, and then eventually they were arrested, no charges ever brought against those men for blatantly threatening rape against Jewish women and Jewish girls. in person, the people walking along that street, a large number of those will have been Jewish. Me, when I saw that video, you're talking about my friends, you're talking about my neighbours, you're talking about my daughter's school friends. This you're talking about, not a single charge brought against those men on video. We've got their names, we've got their faces, got the car number plate on video committing that crime.
Yeah.
When people say we don't have two-tier justice in this world,
no, we absolutely
if
do.
they said it about black people, if they said it about Muslims, they were Jewish or atheists, I bet you anything they'd have been charged with a hate crime.
But she was a really easy target. It was out there and it was amplified on social media, as these things always are. But police knew where she lived. She was a member of a community. She
Husband was a Tory councillor.
And so she was an easy target, and it was so easy to get her and give her the advice to plead guilty, which I still think was wrong.
Indeed. This links into, I mean, how politics has been completely changed over this since the 7th of October attack on the 23rd in 2023. The Foreign Secretary yesterday announced sanctions against the Israeli government, members of the government, also ending trade talks with the Israeli government over what is going on in terms of the IDF military action in Gaza right now, and also the blockade over aid. Israeli government has been allowing some aid in. It's not actually, say, getting to the right people. UN, every international body and charity, many of whom, by the way, are frankly, in my view, Hamas mouthpieces now. They really are. These are not independent bodies, not independent charities, a lot of them, but are pointing out, the horrific suffering of the people in Gaza. There's no doubt at all about that. Innocent men, women and children, particularly the children we're concerned about, who haven't got enough to eat. We've had talk about famine for best part of 2 years now. I mean, I'm amazed by how many people seem to look remarkably well in these videos when we've got talk of famine. There are plenty of video footage put out by people living in Gaza of, food in delicatessens and in supermarkets and in restaurants. So there's some big question marks about this. We know a load of aid went in. There was enough aid that went in for food to last till midsummer. That aid has probably been, as it has been previously and well documented, taken by Hamas fighters. They use it as a weapon of war themselves, even against their own people. But David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, announcing sanctions against members of a government which is the only democratic nation state in the Middle East, are close allies who are representing people who are the victims of the most heinous terror attack we have seen in many, many decades. Certainly the worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust in the 1930s and 40s. They are fighting back against a terrorist organisation that says they will do it again at the first opportunity. That terrorist organisation is using civilians as human shields. Using civilians as human shields, whether you're in a refugee camp, under a hospital, in a school, that itself is a war crime. We don't see the calling out of Hamas by David Lammy. Indeed, Hamas thanked David Lammy and the British government for what they did yesterday. We're on the wrong side of history here, aren't we?
Yeah, we absolutely are. How can you be backing a terrorist organisation that carried out the atrocities and still continue to carry out atrocities against their own people? They aren't nice. They're never going to negotiate. They're never going to be reasonable.
They're only going to give up hostages when they're forced to. They don't do it out of the goodness of their heart.
Well,
they took them out for a reason.
And then they use it as some kind of propaganda video when they hand these people back. And I think that's absolutely appalling. It's not to say that everything that has been done by the Israeli government is correct, because I think there are an awful lot of issues there. But you need to back up an ally, a democratic nation in the Middle East. Why do you punish them for the actions of a terrorist group? So, David Lammy, I know you're going to be listening. Stop doing this. Ridiculous.
It's virtue signalling and it's appeasing a large Muslim vote in this country. We've got 5 MPs for Gaza. It's just shame. It's genuine. It's shame on our nation.
Yeah, it is.
The Israeli ambassador, who I know well, being called in to be admonished by the Foreign Secretary. I have to say, I hope she told him to do one, frankly. I really, really do.